such a treat for both of us to present. So this morning, Bev and I thought that we would talk about the relationship between the archivist and the researcher, and the tensions that may exist and the opportunities for collaboration that exist, and also to talk about how the archivist sees the archive and how the researcher sees it, and how we can collaborate together to get the best out of the archive. So, Bev.
So, yes, I'm the archivist for the Oxford English Dictionary. The copies of material here are actually held at OUP. The physical things are from the Murray papers and the shelves here. So, at OUP we have a special system for cataloguing archives. It's not available to the public, so for OUP, when a researcher wants to do work in the OED collection, they have to come to me directly, and I have to kind of facilitate their research by looking in the catalogue for them. It's just because the way the catalogue was set up, it's not very user intuitive, so it's difficult for users to understand what the material is unless we help guide them. So it's very much a sort of collaboration between the researcher and the archivist, in that they will come and say what they want to see, and I will guide them and help them with what material they might want to look at. And you were asking me what sometimes is most frustrating is that sometimes I'll get people coming and saying, well, I'm interested in words, what should I look at? And I've got hundreds of boxes of material on words, so sometimes it's difficult to narrow it down to just one particular focus. But I mean, have a look at the material here. This kind of chronicles the history of the dictionary. And just to explain, it was first started in the 1850s. The first part was issued in 1884, which culminated in the first volume, which you can see here. We've opened it up to archives, and you can have a look at the entry, all using illustrated quotations from literature to show how words came to be and changed over time. And it was finally completed in 1928, and then we've gone on to various supplements and second editions, and we're now working on the third edition at the press at the moment. So that's just a little background.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I think the basic thing to understand to get the most from these tangible objects is that there are two different types of dictionaries. There are diachronic dictionaries, which is what the Oxford English Dictionary is, so diachronos, across time. So those dictionaries give the biography of a word, showing how a word has been used across time, and therefore when you look at the dictionary, after the head word, the definition, there's then a paragraph of quotations that show you how that word has been used throughout its life. The other type of dictionaries, like your desktop dictionary, your Merriam-Webster's, that one is called a synchronic dictionary, or your little concise Oxford, and that basically gives you a snapshot of language at a moment in time. So if you understand the concept of a diachronic dictionary, it takes a great amount of time and skill to create that kind of dictionary, because you need to collect examples of that word. And it's that process that when they founded the dictionary in 1858 in London, they were really smart, because they realized that a small group of men living in London or Oxford couldn't create the world's first comprehensive dictionary of English without help from the public. So they decided to crowdsource it, and they put ads in journals, on little leaflets that they distributed through clubs and societies, not just within Britain but throughout the world, and asked people to read their local books and write out quotations of words from those books. And I'll just show you. They asked people to write them on little slips of paper, and they had no idea whether this would be a success or not, but it was such a success, and so many people sent in slips that Royal Mail had to put a red pillar box outside James Murray's house at 78 Banbury Road. So if you're walking up the Banbury Road towards Summertown, on your right, have a look. The red pillar box is still there, and there's now a blue plaque outside his house.
This is the box of slips that I house at the press, and we have about 600 of these boxes just for the first edition of the dictionary, for all the slips that were sent in. And we have half of them are the slips that were chosen to go in the dictionary, and half of them are the slips that they didn't use. So you can see what went in and what didn't go in. So it's
and around 4 million slips, probably
like
2 million.
Them, yeah, lots and lots of slips.
And the scriptorium, so James Murray at 78 Banbury Road, he was trying to construct the dictionary from inside the family house. He had 11 children, and his long-suffering wife, Ada, said, James, you have to get out of the house. There are too many slips and pieces of paper and books. So he built this shed in the back garden, which was partially dug into the garden. Therefore, during the winter, very dank and cold, they used to have to wrap their legs in newspaper to stay warm. That is James Murray there on the right-hand side.
He actually built two, built one in his house in London before he moved to Oxford. And when OUP agreed to publish the dictionary in 1879, he moved to Oxford and built another one in his garden. It got destroyed in the 30s, so it no longer exists.
Yeah, but these are the slips. So sometimes people just cut out the actual book and pasted it onto a sheet of paper and sent it in. That's a famous one by Frederick Furnivall, who had been the editor before James Murray. He just cut out the
sometimes they would cut out, like, 16th century books or something.
Yes, really
which
valuable
you look at now and you think, oh.
But the sort of classic slip looks like that, where the head word, the word that they're exemplifying with this quotation, is written up in the left-hand corner. You've then got the date, the author, the title, the page number, and then the quotation. So that's how most of them look. When you go through Bev's archive, what is really fun is the editors used to recycle paper a lot. So when you're looking at a slip, it's always a good idea to look at the reverse side. And one of the editors, this is an example, when you turn over this particular slip, it's on the back of a chocolate wrapper. And Arthur Mayling seems to like his chocolate.
No chocolate.
Yeah, great. So that's that. And so, yeah, so just to say, I mean, there are lots of questions. I didn't know really the format of this as to whether you wanted to have a discussion, but Bev and I often talk together about how the archivist sees the archive, how the researcher sees it, whether there are silent parts of an archive, whether it's frustrating for the archivist to see a lot of researchers all flocking to the same objects, and what else exists within an archive that is untapped. It might be untapped and it may not be accessed for a good reason. There's no sort of value in it. Or it may be that actually there are some untold stories there. And so for the example of us working together, we, as I mentioned, a lot of people around the world sent in slips. So we've known, and the dictionary wasn't just published in 1928 to make money. The press published it gradually in little fascicles, so there were 126 fascicles between 1884 and 1928. So we knew from the prefaces in each of those fascicles who some of those people were, because Murray would sometimes thank them for sending in so many slips. So we knew that there were several hundred, but we didn't know exactly who they all were until in Bev's archive, there are these address books, which Bev and the archive knew about, but scholars hadn't used them, and no one had referred to them in their scholarship.
Just to you talk about the difference between archivists and researchers. So an archivist doesn't have time to do deep dives into this material because their job is to catalogue it and get it out there for people to use. But I can't go into spend hours poring over each page of this. Whereas that's what a researcher can do. So you need to facilitate the researcher to find these things and then do the work on them. So I'd say that's the key difference between.
And so 10 years ago, in one of the boxes, I came across this book, and I opened it up, and I immediately recognized Murray and the editor's handwriting, and this is his one of 3, we then discovered, of his address books. And in this, he gives the names and the addresses of all of those people. Not only their names and the addresses, all these people around the world who sent in the examples, but also every book that person read, the number of slips that they sent in from that book, and the date that he received it. So for those of you here who are digital humanists, as soon as I saw that, I just thought, digital project, fantastic, right? So I worked with the team. At that point, I was going to Stanford for a new job there, and I worked with a team of students, and together we researched each of those people and found out as much as we could about them. And then ultimately that's what that book is about, because it's about all those. It turns out that there were 3,000 people, and many of them are very colourful. Some of the sort of highlights are that there are a lot more women than we thought, so there are up to 500 women around the world who are really contributing and sending in thousands of slips and really helping. And they weren't just readers sending in slips, but they also, Murray was very open to the contribution of women, and they also contributed as sub-editors and specialists as well. And that most of these people were not the scholarly elites who you might expect to be creating this really scholarly text, but they were the autodidacts, they were the amateurs, they were people who, like Murray, actually many of them left school at 14 or 15. And this project, this was one of my research questions: what was motivating these people to give freely? They did this, they volunteered, and we're talking a huge contribution. The top contributor sent in 165,000 slips, and his name was Thomas Austin. Yeah, so I'll stop now.
My strict 10-minute
Yeah.
rule. Wonderful, thank you so much. Well, this room has plenty of researchers and actually plenty of archivists too. So I'd invite people to come and have a closer look, and any questions?